We are back on the record at 1:11.
So far as you know, has the board ever commissioned another appraisal other than the Bolton appraisal that I believe we've marked as Exhibit 3 that we've looked at today?
Object form.
Objection form.
Oh, I'm sorry, what's the objection?
They didn't commission the appraisal. It was done jointly through Mr. Elshire and his client and Mr. Del Fuente. It was done jointly. It was not the board.
Oh, okay.
And additionally, you just asked about any appraisal in general, not with regard to any particular property at
Well,
any time.
that's a fair one. I'll go with that. Let me try again.
Okay.
We have seen an appraisal here today. It's marked as Exhibit 3. Now, I understood you to tell me, but you can take it back if you want to, that it was in part paid for with funds of the water supply company. Did I hear you right?
That's what I've heard, yes.
And it was delivered, among others, to the lawyer who's sitting here with you today, who's the lawyer for the water supply company. Is that right?
I assume so, yes. He wrote about it in the January 26th letter, or 25th letter.
Okay. And that was going to be my next question. And the lawyer incorporated that information into his January demand letter, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, aside from whatever involvement it had with the payment of money and other things in the Bolton appraisal, that's Exhibit 3, has the board ever gotten another value opinion for any of the property within the area of the old wastewater treatment plant? There has been another appraisal that I think certain board members saw, but I don't recall the specifics about what that appraisal includes. So just to be sure we're clear what I'm asking so we don't draw an objection, I'm asking about, is there an appraisal done by, and we're setting apart the Exhibit 3 appraisal, we're just, we know about that one. Mm-hmm. Is there an appraisal that's done by an appraiser selected by the board?
No.
Paid by the board?
No.
Instructed by the board?
No.
Okay. Of any part of the land within the old wastewater treatment plant?
Not in 2019.
Do you know of any appraisal that meets those requirements ever?
There's a Hinton appraisal, but I'm not familiar with what it includes or excludes, to your question.
And so do you believe that the Hinton appraisal that Hinton was selected by the board?
Yes.
You do? Why do you believe that?
Because it has been talked about by the plaintiffs in open meetings in the past.
That's the reason that you think that Hinton was selected by the board?
Oh, why it was selected by the board?
Do you think, here's my question, do you believe that Hinton was an appraiser the board selected, that the board chose Hinton?
That's what the plaintiffs have said, so yes.
Is that the only basis upon which you would believe that?
The board paid for it. The plaintiffs have made known that there is a $600 check that was paid for by the then a signatory to the account.
Is that the one that's signed by Danna Martin?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Even though I haven't seen that, that's what they allege.
So we know that, or at least you're saying that your understanding is that water supply company money was used to pay for the Hinton appraisal.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we can look at it if we need to, but you do recall we looked at the January 25 letter which says the Hinton appraisal is probably fraudulent. Do you remember that?
Object form.
Object form.
I don't recall that from this letter.
Okay. Just tell me then, is the board placing even a tiny bit of reliance on the Hinton appraisal in any of its decision making with regard to this matter?
Objective form.
The board, in open meeting on October 26,
and in a letter and communication to our members, recently said that we considered all of the appraisals that were available to us.
Oh, so, okay. So this board reviewed the Hinton appraisal.
It's, I mean, that would be individuals on the board, whether they looked at it or not, but those appraisals were available to all of our board members.
Are you saying that this board made use and reliance on the Hinton appraisal in its decision-making?
Check the form.
The board members at the meeting expressed different levels of reliance on different appraisals. So
Did anybody at the meeting express reliance on the Hinton appraisal? Anybody?
I don't recall that specifically.
This man over here said at the meeting, nobody relied on the Hinton appraisal, didn't he?
Check the form.
I don't recall.
You don't know one way or the other.
I don't
Check the
recall.
form.
And why would this board rely on the Hinton appraisal when later the appraiser of its lawyer's selection reached a much different value opinion? Why would the board rely on the Hinton appraisal?
Check the form.
The board had available three appraisals. And so what they relied upon, I can't speculate.
Did you, in the exercise of good faith, using reasonable diligence and acting in the best interests of this business, did you place any reliance on the Hinton appraisal from 2015?
I looked at all three appraisals.
Do you understand my question?
You're asking if I placed any reliance on it?
Yes.
So that would require me to judge whether that, I mean, I'm having trouble with the word reliance.
Yes, it does require you to judge and make a decision. Yes, it does.
So,
Check form.
I mean, what part of that appraisal do I need to, I mean, there were parts of it and every other appraisal that I looked at.
Did you rely on any part of the Hinton appraisal in your decision-making as a member of the board in this matter?
Yes.
What part did you rely on?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
How did you square the fact that Bolton said the value was $700,000 of only a part of what Hinton appraised for a whole lot less? How did you square those things and in good faith determine that you should place any reliance on the Hinton appraisal?
Check the form.
Check the form.
I think a lot of people, and I think it was discussed at the board meeting, that appraisals are subjective, and you can get, 100 appraisals or 100 appraisals, and each one would be different. So you're asking me how I would square that? I am not an appraiser, so evaluate. I can't evaluate how they do their business. But I do say, I think everybody knows or acknowledges that, like I said, you ask for 100 different appraisals, you get 100 different answers.
Did you or did you not rely on the Hinton appraisal in your decision-making in this matter?
No.
Objection 4.
You did not. Okay.
Well, hold on. I mean, what part? I mean,
Any part. Any part.
you're making it sound like I solely relied on that appraisal. So,
You can answer that question any way you like.
Okay. So,
Check the form.
I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I relied only on this part. I don't care. Whatever is the truth. Did you rely at all on the Hinton appraisal from 2015 in your decision-making in this matter?
no, I didn't.
Okay.
What was your answer? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
Did any other board member that you can recall speaking or discussing it at that October meeting, did any other board member suggest that he or she relied at all on the Hinton appraisal?
I can't recall specifics of what people said during that meeting. It was
Can you recall any other board member expressing that he or she relied on that Hinton appraisal?
I can't recall that.
Okay. Now, I want to move to what I'm calling the October agreement, because it's just easier for me, because I can't say all the amended, superseding, and all that stuff all the time. October 2019 agreement, and you and I'll know what we're talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and mark, let's see, here we go. Is that 15? 13. I'm going to fix the number so we'll know what we got here. This is 13. And it's my understanding that that is the October 2019 agreement that was recently approved by the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, let me just ask you about a couple of the matters that are in the recitals, and then I'm going to just try to get you to help us to understand what was left in place and what was not left in place, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, number 2 says Danna Martin's affiliation with the buyer and her role in purchasing the property at issue was disclosed to the board. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean that it was disclosed to the board that the benefit of the transaction was going to go to Danna Martin?
Check the form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
What was her role in the transaction?
You're asking about disclosure at the 2015 or 2016 board meeting. I would not know. I wasn't on the board at that time.
Okay. This October agreement, the board might have done a couple of different things, might have handled it a couple different ways, and maybe it's easier if we just kind of understand what the approach was. One thing it might have done is it might have just said that all of what has gone before is out the window. We have considered everything that we believe is relevant, and we are here today going to approve a transaction whereby the water supply company is going to transfer land to Friendship Homes for $203,000. That's one thing the board might have done. Is that what it did?
Check the form.
Objection form.
Which board?
Yours, that you sat on, that you're sitting on. One way to handle the deal, one way to handle the settlement of the deal would have been to say, everything that's gone before is reversed. On this day, we, the board here, October 2019, have considered everything we think is relevant, and we hereby approve a sale to Friendship Homes of these particular tracts of land for $203,000, or whatever price you want. That's one thing the board might have done. It doesn't appear to me that that's what the board did, but I need to know from the board member what the board did.
Check the form.
Objection form.
You're asking me to speculate.
No, I'm not.
You are. You're saying it might have been one thing. That's speculation.
Okay. Did the board throw out everything that had gone before and make its own evaluation and determination about what land transaction it considered was appropriate for the water supply company to do?
Check the form.
Objection form.
I don't know. I'm having a hard time following that question. It has.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay. There's a reference in paragraph 3 to the board's desire in 2015 to generate revenue in order to pay down significant debt. How significant was it?
I was not on the board at that time, so I couldn't define what significant means to.
So, again, just to make sure I understand what the current board's role in this October agreement was, is it fair to say you didn't fact check the stuff that is in these recitals?
Checked form.
Objection form.
Or did you?
It's not fair to say that.
Okay, did you fact check these facts that are in these recitals to determine whether or not they were true or not true?
I reviewed them.
You reviewed what?
I reviewed the recitals.
Did you review anything else?
Checked form.
I ask if you fact checked them, not if you read them. There's a difference.
Not in every instance. Maybe. I mean, I'm looking at this. If you're going to ask me, did I fact check significant debt? I mean, what's the definition of significant? Who sets that definition? I mean, it's your question is very. I mean,
did you fact check the recital that there was disclosure of Danna Martin's affiliation and her role?
It was on the board meetings. I mean, board minutes from.
So you found that in the board minutes?
Yeah, that the was disclosed to the WSC board verbally prior to the board's vote on the transaction. So that indicates to me from that the minutes say that.
But you didn't go look at the minutes.
I've read the minutes.
And you think that's what they say? Okay. How about, did you fact check that the suggestion that the board desired to generate revenue to pay down the debt?
Based on conversations with numerous people familiar with that, you know, that decision was made at open meeting in 2013, or discussed at open meeting in 2013. I wasn't there, but from what I understand, from talking with people who were there and people who have, you know, much more history than I do, that was the desire of the board to generate revenue to pay down that debt.
Did you happen to run across a meeting notice for that December 2015 meeting that stated there would be consideration of the sale of some of the business's property?
I don't recall that amount of detail from my review of those documents.
Do you recall a meeting notice that said anything about a sale of the cooperative's property?
I don't recall. I don't recall, you know, looking that closely that, you know, what I would be looking for.
You know that there needed to be a notice that had the topic, sale of 4.3 acres or whatever the heck it was, right? It had to have one.
I think that's what the pleading was in the lawsuit, in the Toma case.
Do you not know whether or not you have to post a notice that includes all the topics that the board intends to discuss?
Our attorneys have provided me with that knowledge, yes, ma'am.
So you know that there should have been, in order to comply with the law, there should have been a notice prior to the December meeting that included as a topic, we're going to talk about the sale of this property, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But you just haven't found one.
I can't recall reading it.
Has anybody told you that there is one?
No.
Okay. Paragraph 5 of the recitals talks about supposed due diligence on the part of the 2015 board members. Did you investigate that? Did you talk with any of the 2015 board members?
Okay, so number 5, you're asking, whereas in 2015, is that the correct one?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. So you're asking whether I talked with 2015 board members?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What did you learn? Who did you talk to?
Pat Mulligan, Bob Maybane, think Bill Ernest was on the board at that time, and to a limited extent, Mike Madden.
And when did you have these discussions, approximately?
Probably beginning in April of 2019.
What prompted you to have these discussions?
My investigation as to whether they had done due diligence to determine the value of the property.
Did it occur to you that their job was not to determine the value of the property?
Check the form.
Check form.
I don't know. That's a strange question. Say it again, please.
Did it occur to you that their job was not to estimate the value of the property, but to obtain the highest price that the market would bring for property that was no longer needed for the provision of water and sewer service?
Check the form.
Objection form.
I don't know how to answer that. I don't know.
Do you agree that the directors have a responsibility, a fiduciary duty, some have called it, to sell surplus property for the highest price obtainable?
Check the form.
Objection form.
No, ma'am.
You don't believe that's a duty?
Check the form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
You don't know. What is your understanding of the board of directors' duty with regard to surplus property
Check the form.
and the disposition of surplus property?
Check the
Check
form.
What is their duty?
Yes.
Check the form.
Objection form.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not in our articles of incorporation. It's not in our bylaws.
So you don't know.
Check the form.
Check form.
Is that right?
Check the form.
I'm sorry, your answer got kind of stepped on.
Same objection.
So can you say the question again, please?
I asked you if you knew what the duty of the board of directors is or was in 2015 with regard to surplus property and the disposition of surplus property
Check
of the
form.
enterprise.
I don't know what it was in 2015.
Think it changed?
Check the form.
I don't know.
What is it now?
Check the form.
Check form.
I don't know.
Okay. The number 7 talks about 2 appraisals that predate, both of which I think predate the Bolton appraisal. Is that right? No, one doesn't. One does and one doesn't. The 2 appraisals that are referred to in paragraph 7, one of them is the Hinton appraisal we've already talked about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And one of them is an appraisal that the title company that is defending Friendship Homes' title here commissioned and presented. Is that right?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
And that's the Hornsby appraisal?
I don't know the name of the...
Let's be safe and find it real quick. Here we go. Here's Exhibit 17. Could you just confirm? I want to make sure that we know what appraisals are referred to in Item 7 of the recitals of the October agreement.
I believe so. I mean, I'm not familiar with, I mean, I don't have photographic memory, so yes, I mean, I believe so.
Okay. And you can confirm that the Hornsby appraisal was furnished by the title company that's paying for the defense for Friendship in this lawsuit, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It's that Hornsby was not someone, in other words, that the board sought out. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And Hornsby apparently came up with a different number than Bolton. Fair to say?
Yes.
So who went back to who from the board went back to Bolton with the Hornsby appraisal in hand and said, Bolton, what the heck?
Checked form.
I don't know. Nobody to my knowledge.
Wouldn't that be the diligent thing to do, is to go back to an appraiser that you've paid and provide him with information that has come to your attention and ask for him to reconcile that?
Checked form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
You don't know?
Checked form.
I don't know.
Well, you might get better educated if you did that, wouldn't you?
Checked form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
Did you place any reliance at all on the Hornsby appraisal, I believe it's 17, in your decision-making in this matter?
Any reliance at all? Yes, I considered some of it.
What did you rely on?
I don't know, parts of it. I mean, I couldn't tell you right now specifically what parts, just like I couldn't tell you on the Hinton appraisal.
Well, you told me before, you don't have the expertise to know why it is that that Hornsby's number is different from the appraiser that the board paid back in 2018, right?
I don't have that expertise.
You would need to go back to the appraiser that did the original work to get his take on it, wouldn't you?
Checked form.
Objection form.
Theoretically.
Well, what else would you do?
Checked form.
If you don't have it yourself, if you don't have the expertise yourself, what else would you do?
Checked form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
Because what I'm trying to test here is whether it was reasonable and in good faith to place any reliance on the Hornsby appraisal that was provided by a title company and was at odds with the appraiser that the water supply company paid, without making that inquiry and circling back around with that original appraiser.
So what's your question?
Do you think that it was in good faith and in the exercise of reasonable diligence to place any reliance on an appraisal tendered by an opponent for the purpose of securing a transaction that is beneficial to the person who's giving you the appraisal?
Checked form.
Objection form.
Well, I mean, all the Bolton appraisal was paid for by litigants against the plaintiffs against the corporation.
Are you taking back now what you told me earlier, that you know the water supply company participated financially in that appraisal?
Checked form.
Am I taking it back?
Yeah.
I don't know. I said earlier that the water corporation did participate.
And its lawyer over there, Mr. De La Fuente, participated, right?
I don't know.
Well, you saw that he got the appraisal. Do you think he didn't communicate with the appraiser?
I don't know what he did.
All right, you'd expect that he would, wouldn't you?
Checked form.
That's speculation.
Are you backing off from the Bolton appraisal?
Checked form.
Objection form.
Just say it.
Checked
Are you
form.
or are you not?
Checked form.
I previously said that we looked at all three appraisals, or that I did. I mean,
You've got the Hinton appraisal we've already talked about. You've got the Hornsby appraisal given to you by somebody who wants this transaction to stay put for the money that was already paid, right?
Checked form.
We've got the Bolton appraisal that presumably, I mean, we'll get to the bottom of that, I promise, but I'm going to bet you we're going to find that your lawyer participated in the selection of that appraiser, and we know the water supply company paid part of the bill, right?
Checked form.
so I would only say that, yes, the water company paid part of the bill for the Bolton appraisal.
And considered Bolton's appraisal reliable enough to take further steps based on it, right? We've seen them. Written the demand letter, wrote a letter to the members, put it on the website, all those things, right?
So there were additional steps, yes, ma'am.
Because that board considered that appraisal reliable, correct?
Checked form.
They considered it.
You think they would have done those things had the lawyer rely on it if they didn't consider it reliable?
Checked form.
I don't
Would
know.
you?
Object form.
I don't know.
Really? Really? Do you know of any reason that anyone would think the Bolton appraisal is not reliable?
I can't speculate on that.
The answer then is no, you do not. Is that correct?
Object form.
Say the question again.
Do you know of any reason to think that the Bolton appraisal is not reliable?
Object form.
That would cause me to speculate.
So you don't know of any reason. Is that accurate?
Object form.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that since it would require speculation.
You either know or you don't know. It's a yes or no.
Object form.
Objection form.
I don't know.
This is the appraisal that went to your own lawyer and was paid for by cooperative money. If you're going to discount it, then don't you think you should have a reason?
Object form.
And I want to know if you got a reason.
Object form.
Object form.
Restate the original question, please.
Do you have any reason to think that the Bolton appraisal, Exhibit 3, is unreliable?
I'm not an appraiser, so I wouldn't know. I don't know the science of appraisal. I don't know real estate, so I don't know.
You know it has been relied upon by board of directors for the water company, right?
Object form.
Object form.
I know that it has been used by other board members.
And no one's ever suggested to you that the Bolton appraisal is not reliable. Isn't that right?
Object form.
Object form.
I don't recall. I mean, I don't recall. I mean, I don't recall discussions about reliability.
Look,
As
this is so simple. This is very simple.
Okay.
The Bolton appraisal says, according to Mr. De La Fuente's math, that Danna Martin and Friendship Homes walked away from the closing table with almost $500,000 of value that belonged to the members of the water supply company. Do you remember that?
Object form.
No, I don't.
Do you want to go? We can go back to the letter and look at that math. You want to?
Sure.
Can you find Exhibit 1?
Sure. Okay.
Look toward the back and find the numbers. I think it's the section that says something like improper and unfair transaction. Do you see that?
The resulting transaction, being for a price significantly lower than the proper market value at the time, was not fair to WOWC.
You can't find the numbers?
Is that what you?
You can't. I'll help you find the numbers.
Okay.
Just a minute.
This is the part that we discussed earlier, right?
It's okay.
Thus, as a result, the WOWC board at the very least sold property with a proper market value of $700,000 for a price of $203,000, the difference of $497,000.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
That's it.
Okay. So now what's your question about that?
My question is that your lawyer in the January 2019 letter and your appraiser, Bolton, concluded that at the time of the closing, the deal that was done resulted in Martin and Friendship walking away with $497,000 worth of value, property, that really should have belonged to and been available for the members of the cooperative to use to pay debt or whatever, right?
Checked form.
That's a long question, and there's lots of parts.
I'll break it right down if you really make me.
I can't object. I can't agree with that long form question.
Good. 1, your lawyer says that the purchase price was $203,000, right?
$203,000.
You don't know any different, do you?
No, ma'am.
Bolton and your lawyer both say the value was $700,000, right?
Bolton said it.
Well, do we find that in this letter or do we not?
It is there, yes, ma'am.
Your lawyer considered Bolton's work reliable enough to rely on it.
Check form.
Checked
Did he
form.
not?
Checked form.
Now, what's the math? Do we need to check Mr. De La Fuente's math?
Checked form.
Is the difference $497,000 or is he mathematically incorrect?
The math is correct.
Okay.
So, yes.
So what do you want to argue with that, about that?
Checked form.
I'm not arguing. I'm just answering your question.
There's nothing fair or prudent or reasonable or in the interests of the water supply company to allow Danna Martin to walk away with $700,000 worth of property for $200,000, is there?
Checked form.
I don't know.
Okay, so we can be clear that you certainly didn't make a determination that that was fair and reasonable, correct?
Checked form.
Are you shooting me the finger? Are you shooting me the finger? I'm asking you. Keep it to yourself.
That's not what you're mouthing over there. Calling
I didn't
people
say
out.
anything.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Hey.
You
but
shot me the
Hey,
finger.
guys.
Don't do it again.
Everybody needs to behave with proper decorum in this deposition.
He's the one-
Oh, I'm aware that there's friction between people in this deposition, but people need to behave with proper decorum. If y'all have opinions about each other, you can take them outside.
okay, if we can just get this finished, then we'll stop, okay? But I'm going to lose my train of thought, so I need to go back up a little bit. Okay. So what I asked you a minute ago was, wouldn't you agree there's nothing fair, reasonable, or in the best interest of the water supply company to let Danna Martin take $700,000 worth of the company's property for $200,000?
Checked form.
Check form.
And your answer was, I don't know. You want to stay with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So since you don't know, I can be sure that you've not determined that that would be a fair transaction or one that was in the best interest of the water supply company. Is that right?
Checked form.
Check form.
That I have not determined.
I just need to know if you've made a determination of your own. I suspect you have not, but I need to know.
Checked form.
I think I previously said that I relied on parts of 3 different appraisals.
Okay. Did you make a determination in conjunction with this October agreement or anything else? Have you ever made a determination as to whether it is fair and in the best interest of the water supply company to allow Danna Martin to have $700,000 of water supply company property in exchange for $200,000?
Checked form.
That's such a long question. That
No, it's really simple.
It has so many parts, ma'am. It really does. And there's parts of it that I can agree with and parts that I can't.
Let's parse it out then.
And
What do you
so-
agree with?
Parts that I agree with.
Checked form.
Ask the question again, and we'll see what parts I agree with.
Have you made a determination of your own as a sitting board member that a transaction whereby Danna Martin and Friendship Homes end up with $700,000 worth of property in exchange for $200,000 is fair, or in the best interests of the water supply company?
Checked form.
Form.
I voted on October 26 to change many parts of that transaction.
Your view was that the original transaction was not fair and in the best interests of the water supply company. Is that so?
That there were parts of it that needed to be amended? Yes.
That the transaction as it was structured in 2015 or early 2016, that transaction was not fair or in the best interest of the water supply company. Is that your conclusion?
Parts of it. And they were all voted and discussed at that meeting. And we made changes.
One thing you did not change was the conveyance of Tract H1, correct?
That's a specific, I'm not sure about Tract H1. You would have to
Okay.
refresh my memory as to what, and I'll have to rely on counsel for explaining Tract H1.
Well, I honestly never asking you here to involve your counsel unless you really want to.
Okay, I understand.
But here are the deeds, so. First off, you do appreciate that what got conveyed were platted lots, right?
Objection 4.
Let me show you Exhibit 18, which is a subdivision plat that Ms. Martin processed for while she was a director of the water supply company before the closing.
Objection 4.
Okay, so I'm way lost on this.
Well,
I mean, I really don't know how to read these things.
I know. Hang on. Bear with me.
Okay.
Okay. So let me show you Exhibit 19.
Okay.
Which is, you know that there were 2 deeds given back in 2016, right?
Sold?
Do you know that there were 2 deeds given back in 2016?
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Well, if you don't, you don't.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I
Okay.
don't know. I
Do you
know that there was some.
Do you see that
I
exhibit?
mean, I don't.
Okay. Do you see that Exhibit 19 is a deed to Friendship Homes of Tract H1?
This is a warranty deed. The grantor's WOWSC, and the grantee is Friendship Homes. Is that your question? Yes, ma'am.
Well, was there any other transaction that the water supply company did with Friendship Homes other than the one in March 2016? Bless you.
Well, there was something that happened in February of 2017, if I recall correctly, but I'm not.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I don't know about that one either. But do you know of any land conveyance that occurred other than the one that occurred in March 2016?
No, I don't know of any other.
Okay. So you've got a deed there from the water supply company to Friendship Homes, and what's it state?
It says, what, consider, is that what you're looking at?
I've got to speak up and be more articulate. The date of the document.
March 11th, 2016.
Okay. And then let me show you the other deed. And you can find Tract H1 on the plat, right?
Well, yes, ma'am, I see Tract H1.
Okay. Let me show you Exhibit 20,
Okay.
which is a warranty deed for Tract H2. See that?
So right there. Okay. Tract H2, yes, ma'am.
And that's to Friendship Homes, right?
I'm just scanning this.
That's quite all right.
You're asking about Exhibit 20, right?
I believe so, yes, sir. That's the warranty deed with vendor's lien.
Well, I don't see where it says Friendship Homes on here.
Did I give him the wrong one?
Oh, hold on. Yes. And by these presents does grant, sell, and convey into Friendship Homes.
If you're going to read, make sure you read it loud and clear.
Yes. It says, and by these presents does grant, sell, and convey unto Friendship Homes and Hangars, LLC. That's what it says.
Okay. So those, do you see that those are the deeds to the 2 lots that were conveyed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And there actually was, let me find it. Do you know that there actually was a corporate resolution that was prepared in conjunction with all of this? Do you know that?
Corporate resolution when?
Hang on. Fair question. Let me show you Exhibit 22.
So I was not aware until you just showed me this.
Are you aware that the water supply company, by statute, has to have a resolution authorized by the board in order to convey real estate?
I'm not an attorney. I'll trust you if you say so.
Sometimes people who work with these boards, a lot of the time, learn that what the requirements are. Maybe you have and maybe you haven't.
I have not.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that there's a statute that says that in order to convey real property, there has to be a resolution approved by the board of directors?
Would it surprise me?
Yes.
No, ma'am.
And the resolution that I've shown you, which I'm actually not saying was really approved by the board of directors, but it's the only written resolution that I know about. It describes what as the property to be conveyed.
I'll read this slowly. There's 2 sentences I'm just scanning. It says, it is resolved that Windermere Oaks Water Supply Corporation shall sell to Friendship Homes and Hangars, LLC, all of its interest in and to the following described real property situated in Burnett County, Texas, to wit, being Tract H and H2 of Tract H on Piper Lane, a subdivision in Burnett County, Texas, as shown by plat recorded in clerk's document number 201601994, official public records of Burnett County, Texas. I mean, there's others if I need to
You
read.
got to write the part that I was looking for, which is the tracts that were to be conveyed.
Yes, ma'am.
And at least pursuant to that corporate resolution, the property that the board in 2015 or 2016 approved to convey were 2 platted hangar lots, correct?
Objection.
H1 and H2.
That's what I'm reading, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Have you uncovered any other resolution by the board in 2015 or 2016 to convey something different?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now let me show you this.
I mean, I say that. I know that there's a contract that I've read. I can't recall the specifics of that contract between Windermere Oaks and Friendship Homes. So
Put a pin in that and we'll get to it this afternoon, I promise, okay? Here is Exhibit 21, which I'm given to understand is a correction deed that was done in connection with the October agreement? Can you confirm that for me?
So you're asking if this is a correction deed?
I understand that is the correction deed that was executed in connection with the October 2019 agreement, but I need you to confirm that for me if you can.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And again, I'm not trying to make you into a lawyer. Did you happen to know the reason that correction deed was done?
No, I don't know why this correction deed was done. Well, specifically, no, although, oh, yeah, I think that the only thing that I was aware of, and I think I mentioned this earlier, was that there was a half an acre that wasn't properly recorded or something or other. And I believe that this, I mean, looking at it, looking at this correction deed, I think that this takes into consideration that half acre.
Do you know of any corporate resolution that purports to authorize the conveyance of the half acre that you're talking about?
The only, I don't know if the superseded agreement considers that or not, but I believe it does.
Have you seen a corporate resolution that purports to authorize the conveyance of the additional, I think it's .5151 acres?
Have I seen one?
Right.
A corporate resolution?
Yes, like that one you just looked at here.
Right. Does that, I don't recall a corporate resolution to that effect.
Okay. And I want my question to include both one that would be dated 2015 or 2016 and one that might be current. I want to include both types. Have you seen either type of corporate resolution that purports to authorize the conveyance of the 0.5151 acres?
Checked for.
I have not seen a corporate resolution to that effect.
Okay. Now, the correction deed does not do a thing with regard to the conveyance of Tract H2, right? It just continues to convey Tract H2.
Checked for.
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what exactly you're
We
asking.
could put them
versus
side
what
by
it's-
side,
Put what side by side?
the correction deed with the original, if we needed to.
Okay.
You saw the original deed that conveyed Tract H2. Remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
The correction deed also purports to convey Tract H2, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And its effective date is what?
Objection form.
I don't.
Is there a date at the top of the document?
Effective date, yes. Date effective March 14th, 2016.
Okay. So it is purports to be retroactive, is that right?
It says that the effective date is March 14th.
Well, you signed it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't sign it March 2015 or
No, ma'am, I
2016?
did not.
You signed it just the other day, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if it's going to be effective in 2016, it's retroactive, right?
Okay. Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
that's what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the correction deed surely doesn't do a thing with regard to Tract H1, which we saw in the other deed, right?
Objection form.
Checked for.
Okay, I don't know.
Well,
It
you
doesn't
remember
say-
we looked at
It doesn't say anything about Tract 1.
Okay. Remember we looked at the
H1.
deed that was back in 2016 that conveyed Tract H1?
Yes, ma'am.
This board in the October agreement didn't do make any changes to that deed, right?
Section 4.
Check the form.
I don't,
Well, if you did, just tell me, that's all.
I don't know. I mean, I don't believe so.
Okay. So if one of these plaintiff's complaints in the lawsuit is that there should not have been a conveyance of tracts H1 and H2 effective 2016 for $203,000, that matter is still in controversy, right?
Check the form.
I don't know. That's a legal question.
Well, did anybody rescind those conveyances? They did not, right?
What conveyance? I mean,
The conveyances of Tract H1 that you've just looked at.
did anybody rescind
Right.
that?
Board didn't rescind those conveyances, did it?
No.
Okay. Did Danna Martin pay the difference?
Check the form.
Check the form.
Or Friendship Homes pay the difference of $497,000 if Mr. De La Fuente's math is correct?
Check the form.
Check the form.
I don't know. She paid some amount.
Do you think she paid $497,000 in
No,
this
I mean, I
settlement?
mistake.
Check the form.
Check the form.
So, no.
Okay, so if the complaint is that the directors breached their duties by conveying tracts H1 and tracts H2 back in March 2016 for $203,000, that has not been resolved, has it?
Check the form.
Section form.
I'm not an attorney, so I want to know how that would work.
Okay. But you can confirm for us the transactions of H1 and of the conveyances of H1 and H2 were not rescinded. You can confirm that, can't you?
Yes, ma'am.
You can confirm that nobody paid the difference between $203,000 and what Bolton says the property was worth at the time, right?
Check the form.
Check the form.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the October agreement doesn't contemplate either one of those things happening, correct?
Check the form.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, did the board intend that those transactions should be rescinded and set aside?
Check the form.
And by those, I mean the conveyance tract H1 and tract H2 for $203,000. Did the board intend that those conveyances be set aside?
Check the form.
Check the form.
I don't know the legalities of that.
Did the board intend that Danna Martin or Friendship Homes should come up with $497,000 in
Check.
connection with this settlement?
Check the
Check the
form.
form.
I can't speak to the board's intentions.
Well, you can. You were on it. Of course you can.
Check the form.
Check.
Weren't you on the board?
On October 26, 2019?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And when this settlement, this October 2019 agreement was signed, didn't you sign it?
To the October 2016 agreement? Yes.
You signed it
Yes.
for the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the intention, from the board's perspective, was the intention to require Danna Martin or Friendship Homes to cough up $497,000 in connection with the settlement?
Check the form.
Form.
The intention was to amend and supersede the prior contract.
And since you're not a lawyer, I'm not going to dwell on those terms with you right now. I'm just
Thank you.
trying to figure out what the board intended would be the result. Okay?
Check the form.
So,
Form.
when you signed this agreement on behalf of the board, did you believe it was the board's purpose and intention that Danna Martin or Friendship Homes be required to pay the difference between what was paid back in 2016 and what Bolton says the property was worth at that time?
Check the form.
Form.
The intention was to correct deficiencies that we saw in the prior contract.
And the payment of the difference between $203,000 and $497,000, or sorry, $700,000 was not one of those deficiencies, right?
Check the form.
You are, I can't answer that because you're specifically saying one value and there were other values under consideration by the board.
Well, I know that Mr. De La Fuente is waiting to object if I ask you what the board was thinking about. And I'm not asking you that. You signed the agreement. You had to have a purpose and intent in mind when you did that on behalf of the board. And I just want to know, because I think I know the answer, was that purpose and intention that Danna Martin and Friendship Homes be required to come up with the difference between the amount that was paid in 2016 and the value that Bolton says the property had in 2016?
Check the form.
The intention was to correct the contract according to what the board viewed as the deficiencies.
So the board didn't view as a deficiency the difference between what was paid and the value.
Check the form.
Object form.
Because, I mean, did it correct that or did it not? You can tell me whatever.
The board in that agreement obtained a promise of additional $20,000.
Okay, that's it. 20 grand.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No 497,000.
$20,000. Yes,
All right. Why don't we stop for however long you want to?
How much more you got?
It shouldn't be much, but whatever you want to do. I'm good.
Come on.
Well, wait, let's see if our court reporter's
I'm
good.
good with y'all. Whatever y'all
So Joe, what do you want?
I want to finish.
Great, perfect. Okay, you have spoken before.
Can I
about-
tidy up real quick?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna get a water. I'll keep going. Y'all can hear me.
Sad but true. No, I didn't say that. That's off the record. Off the record.
It's all right, got me in trouble in middle school.
Let me show you Exhibit 14, and let Mr. De La Fuente get back and take a look at that before you start answering. But just by way of preview, you've talked about a contract from time to time, and I want to see if that's the one you've been talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so when it talks in paragraph 2 of Article 1 of the October agreement about unimproved property contract, is the exhibit you're looking at now, is that what we're talking about?
Okay, I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I'm looking at page, the October agreement, you'll have a copy there,
Okay.
and it's page 2, Article 1, paragraph 2. First, will you tell us what exhibit it is, and I'll make a note of that so I don't have to ask again.
Is this the amended, restated? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. And so page 2,
What exhibit number is that, sir?
I'm seeing 13. Okay, now you're asking about what's
I'm
this
looking
about?
at Article 1, paragraph 2, acknowledgement. See that?
Yes, ma'am. Acknowledgement of consideration.
there is a reference in the very last line to unimproved property contract.
Okay.
I want to put a document with that. Is the right document to put with that the unimproved property contract that I just handed you?
Exhibit 14?
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, this has the numerical 4.3, looks like plus minus acres, right?
This meaning what?
The Exhibit 14, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. It has the property 4.3 plus minus acres,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? So, where is the acreage that was not conveyed? Where is it physically located on the ground?
Checked form.
I don't know.
Well, how do we know that from the contract? How can we figure that out?
Checked form.
I don't know.
When the board approved the I assume you did, the conveyance of the additional 0.5151 acres, did this current board approve that?
Yes, ma'am. It was part of that agreement on October 26th, I believe.
So this board approved the conveyance of 0.5151 acres of additional property, and it didn't require, or maybe 20,000 is what it required as payment. Is that right?
Checked form.
Check form.
That's not what the agreement says, so no.
Well, tell me what the agreement says.
Checked form.
Because I didn't see payment for the 0.5151 acres, but I don't want to overlook it.
Checked form.
So tell me, where is it?
I can't tell you.
Do you believe there was payment made for the 0.5151 acres?
Checked form.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that would work.
Shouldn't there have been payment for the 0.5151 acres?
Checked form.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that because I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure how that would work.
How would it ever be fair or in the best interest of the water supply company to give its property away for no consideration? How would that ever be fair and in the best interest of the water supply company?
Checked form.
I don't know.
Do you see in the October agreement any provision that requires payment of anything, much less market value, for 0.5151 acres that was approved for conveyance?
Checked form.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so there are two statements, 4 and 5, on page 3
Okay,
that may be related, but I don't know.
let's see, 4 and 5. So 4, I don't see a provision for payment, but I might be overlooking it. Do you see it in 4?
Well, it says that was included in the transaction, and I assume that means the transaction from March 2016.
Well, this board approved the conveyance, right?
The 2019 board?
Yes.
Yes, this is.
And in order
with the-
to approve the conveyance, isn't it correct that this board needed to be persuaded that the conveyance was fair and in the best interests of the water supply company?
We discussed all of that at the board meeting, that the entirety of that contract was in the best interest of the corporation.
How would just as succinctly as you can, was there a decision made by this board, a determination by this board, that the conveyance of .5151 acres for no additional consideration, or maybe $20,000, was fair to the water supply company or in its best interest?
Object to form.
Objection form.
The entirety of the October 26 agreement conveyed the board's intent.
Is it fair then to say that there was no determination by the board that the conveyance of the .5151 acres was fair to the water supply company or in its best interest?
Object to form.
Object form.
No.
Okay, so there either was a determination of that or there was not. And it doesn't matter to me what the answer is, I just want the truth.
Okay, so
Object to form.
I'm sorry, so say the question again.
From what we have seen in the document, the October 2019 agreement contemplates there will be a conveyance of a half acre, more than a half acre actually, of additional property without payment.
Object to form.
Object form.
That was the paragraph you just directed me to. If you want to direct me to another paragraph or tell me I'm wrong about that, that's fine.
Object to form.
Objection form.
I don't know how to answer that.
Then answer this.
Okay.
Can you envision any circumstance in which giving away the cooperative's property for nothing would ever be fair to it or in its best interests?
Object to form.
Objection form.
That's speculation, so I can't answer that.
Okay. Did the board rely on an opinion of an attorney that the water supply company had an obligation to convey the .5151 acres?
Object to form, and to the extent she's asking about advice of counsel, I'm going to instruct you not to answer.
Let me just tell you something, the reason I'm asking you these questions. There's a safe harbor provision that allows you as a board member to rely on advice of attorney and to defend what you've done on that basis. So that's why I'm asking from time to time, did you rely on advice of attorney? So if you want to take advantage of that, and it's true, you'll be able to. But I'm happy for you not to answer if that's what your lawyer wants. I just want you to know I'm not badgering you. There's a safe harbor provision for reliance, good faith reliance on advice of counsel, and if you want to do that, I want you to have the opportunity. But you don't have to.
Okay.
And to the extent that the board considered privileged communications, that privilege belongs to the board. And to the extent that that is or would be a basis for a response to Ms. Allen's question, I'll instruct you not to answer. To the extent that there's any advice or other information that is not privileged, you may answer.
Okay. So let's start with the question again, please.
Well, my question is pretty simple. I mean, did the board conclude that giving away a half an acre of property without requiring somebody to pay for that was in the best interest of the water supply company and was fair to it? That is my question.
Object to form.
Form.
But we've had trouble with that one.
Object to form.
I don't know how to answer that. There's so much in there that I could object to. I mean, that would.
What's in there that's so hard? Half an acre, no consideration. Is that fair and in the best interest of the water supply company, or is it not?
Object to form.
Why is that hard?
Object to form.
Is it hard because it's not fair?
Checked form.
We had an agreement. We had a board meeting about this. It included it in there. It was the intent of the board to correct this document, this contract.
Okay. The contract that you're talking about, Exhibit 14, that's the contract that was the subject of one of the blatant Open Meetings Act violations, was it not?
Checked form.
I don't know how that would work. I don't know. I'm not,
You don't know how that works?
No, ma'am.
Do you know any of the circumstances that surround this contract that is Exhibit 14?
Checked form.
I'll say that again. Do I know
Do you know
any?
the circumstances that gave rise to Exhibit 14?
Checked form.
No, I don't know those circumstances.
Do you know whether or not it was purportedly approved at a meeting that violated TOMA?
Do I know if it was approved, purportedly approved?
Was it purportedly approved at a meeting that violated TOMA? That is, are there meeting minutes that reflect a discussion of Exhibit 14 for a meeting where it was not posted on the notice?
I'm all confused now. I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. Did somebody suggest to you, or let me say it this way, did the board reach the conclusion that the water supply company was somehow obligated to convey the .5151 acres?
That it was to convey that this board was, okay, so.
That any board,
Okay.
that the water supply company was obligated to convey .5151 acres?
Well, the original contract said 4.3, and I think it was a deficiency of the deed that it said 3.86 at some point.
Well, so let's take that one step at a time. Do you have any earthly idea whether Exhibit 14 is or is not a valid contract? Valid and
form.
binding and enforceable?
Checked form.
Checked form.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't.
Did the board reach a conclusion in connection with its approval and execution of the October agreement whether the contract that is Exhibit 14 is valid and enforceable?
Object form.
Objection form.
You're asking a lot of very, I don't know. I don't know. Because you're asking legal questions that would require an attorney to,
No, I'm not.
I think you are.
I just want to know what the board did or didn't conclude.
Checked form.
I don't care if it was right.
Yeah.
Just want to know what the board did or didn't conclude. Did the board conclude that Exhibit 14 was a valid and binding contract on the water supply company?
Checked form.
Checked form.
The board amended and superseded that contract.
Okay, what did the board amend? What part of it?
Object form.
Well, I mean, it amended a number of parts of it.
Can we just
I mean,
go
we're-
back to
we're-
this October agreement and you just find the amendments for me and we'll check them off?
Checked form.
Wouldn't they be in here?
Checked form.
So the amendments, I believe, are on page 3 of that document.
Of the October agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 13?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, so number 1 does say the word amendment, but there never was a taxiway easement to the 7-acre remainder, right?
Checked form.
I can't answer that. I don't know how to answer that.
Well, did the board determine one way or the other whether the remainder 7-acre tract had taxiway access in connection with its decision to approve the October agreement?
Checked form.
I just don't know how to answer that.
Do you know, as you sit here today, whether the remaining 7 acres had taxiway access before this agreement was approved?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on taxiways and easement.
Did you have an impression one way or the other about whether the 7 acres had taxiway access before this October agreement?
I didn't have an impression one way or the other.
What was the purpose for including a provision for taxiway access?
What was the purpose?
If you didn't know what the situation was before the agreement was done, why did you include this provision?
Because I believe there were member comments in the past at previous open meetings about that access. So there were.
What was the problem? Or was there a problem?
What they contended was that there wasn't access, or there would not be access.
Did the board investigate and get to the bottom of that?
Check the form.
I don't know if they did or not.
Did the board that you are president of investigate and get to the bottom of whether or not the 2016 board had landlocked the 7-acre remainder?
Check the form.
I think that would be privileged information.
The question, did the board undertake an investigation, you think is privileged?
Check the form.
Okay. Say you're not going to answer that.
I'm not going to answer that.
It's because it's privileged.
I believe so.
Okay. Do you know whether or not the 7-acre tract was landlocked as a result of the March 2016 transaction?
I'm not an expert on how that would work.
Do you know what taxiway access the land that was encompassed within the old wastewater treatment plant had? Do you know what taxiway access it had, if any?
No, I don't.
Do you know whether it even had taxiway access?
I don't.
So you don't know whether any of the tract had taxiway access before?
I don't.
And when members came to the board complaining that the remaining 7 acres was unmarketable because it didn't have any taxiway access, did the board undertake to investigate that?
Check the form.
Which board are you talking about? I don't know.
Any board that you know of.
I can't speak for any other board other than my own.
You could know what they did.
Check the form.
I don't know what they did.
The member comments that you referred to earlier, the complaints about access, do you remember referring to that?
Yes, ma'am.
When was that?
That would have had to have been 2018 when they complained about it.
And that would have had to have been then because?
Because that was the only meeting I attended, or one of the few meetings I attended in 2018.
Which meeting was that?
That was the annual member meeting.
In 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so it garnered your attention, apparently, that there was an issue with access to the 7-acre remainder. Yes?
Yes, I think so.
When you became a member of the board, what steps, if any, did you take to determine whether or not that matter had been resolved?
Well, we discussed that in executive council, executive session at times.
Okay. Did you take any other steps besides executive session discussion to try to determine whether or not the matter had been resolved, the matter of access to the 7-acre remainder had been resolved?
No, not outside of executive session.
Did the board reach a conclusion about whether or not the matter of access, taxiway access to the 7-acre remainder had been resolved?
Not out of executive session, no.
The board took no steps until the October 2019 agreement to address taxiway access to the 7-acre remainder. Is that right?
Check the form.
The 2019 board, is that what you're asking?
I'm really asking any board, but
Okay.
I can see that there's a provision in the October 2019 agreement about a taxiway easement. I'm wondering if the board took any steps at all to address access to the 7-acre remainder aside from the October 2019 agreement.
Not out of executive session.
Well, you better not be taking steps in executive session. Are you taking steps in executive session?
Oh, we weren't taking steps in executive session.
Were you taking steps
I'm sorry.
anywhere?
I'm sorry. I should have said discussion and not steps, I guess is the proper. So what was your second question?
I want to know if the board was taking any steps when you became its president, aware of this issue that had been raised at the members' meeting, and you became its president. Did the board take any steps to address taxiway access for the 7-acre remainder?
Check the form.
No. Not out of executive session.
Did the board take steps, did it act in executive session to address this taxiway access to the 7-acre remainder?
Did you ask if it took steps in executive session?
Yes.
I can't answer that because it was executive session.
You do know that the law does not allow you to take action in executive session, right?
Right.
And so I'm asking you about action.
Did it take action in
Yes.
executive session?
Did it take any action to address that concern that you were aware of when you became the president of the board, that there was an issue with taxiway access for the remainder, 7 acres?
It did not take any action in executive session.
Did it take any action outside of executive session?
I think I said that already.
I don't, just say it.
No.
Thank you.
Can I get a Coke, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
You want to stop and stretch your legs a minute?
Just if I can have a Coke, that'd be great.
Well, somebody can bring you a Coke, but you could also get up and stretch your legs if you'd like.
How much longer you got, Kenny?
Not too.
Well, we said that an hour and a half ago.
Look, I thought I'd be done before noon. You know why I'm not done before noon? So that's all I'm going to say about that. Let me just sit here and take a minute and go through all this mess and figure out how I can focus it.
Appreciate it.
We are off the record at 2:30.